can start.
Hello, am I audible for everyone?
Yes.
Okay, thanks. Hey, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the AMS session on navigating the MENA FinTech market. As a quick introduction, I'm Aditya Tulsian, the founder and CEO at Numberz. We are an enterprise-focused FinTech SaaS platform where we enable corporates to streamline the receivables and collections. And we currently serve some of the largest Fortune 500 and fast-growing global SaaS behemoths. It's my absolute pleasure to be actually moderating this session, okay, and sharing a lot of the learnings around how FinTechs like us can actually explore the opportunities in the MENA region. Last year, we had actually entered the MENA region as a company, and we made a pretty decent headway with some of the largest corporates there. One thing we definitely learned that while the deal making in the MENA region can be slow, okay, but it's a largely untapped market with a bit of its own nuances. It definitely has sands of gold. It depends on you how you really go about it. With that, let me just put a quick context and a structure to the session today. What we're going to do is we're going to break this whole session into 4 parts. The first part is we would love to have our 2 panelists share about what are the opportunities in the MENA region, how they look at it. And number 2, getting a bit more operational is if you as a FinTech, what are some of the details that you should keep in mind, okay, when you enter the region and you start exploring the region. The third, especially given today's time, how has COVID really affected the whole market, and both what opportunity does it bring with us and what should we keep in mind. And fourth, that is where all of us are here. It opens to audience questions so that whatever's in your mind, please feel free to ask so that we can give you the best answers, okay, and help you take your own decision. With that, let me quickly introduce our esteemed panelists. Of course, I will do I will not do justice to the work that they've already done, so I'll ask them to go a bit more details. But as a quick introduction, we first have Mirna Sleiman, the founder and CEO of FinTech Galaxy, a leading crowdsourcing platform in the region. Mirna works towards empowering FinTechs like us, help connect with banks, startups, experts across the ecosystem and help all these guys come up with more innovation in the whole region. Second up, we have Houssam Itani, the EY banking and capital markets leader for the entire MENA region. He works closely with the financial institutions, government, and regulatory bodies in the entire FinTech space with focus on strategy, business transformation, execution, customer experience, and emerging tech. We couldn't have got a better panel for you to understand both how you think as a startup and how do you navigate the regulatory. With that, I'm actually going to first start with Mirna. Mirna, can you give a better introduction, okay, and how you want the audience to know about you?
So hi, good morning from Dubai. My name is Mirna Sleiman, and what we do is something very complex yet very, very interesting. FinTech Galaxy is a digital platform that connects the global FinTech ecosystem with regional institutions for collaboration through offering a cloud-based innovation crowdsourcing platform. So we run hackathons, challenges, we connect both demand and supply on one platform. And we've concluded more than 20 programs so far, and we actually launched today 5 more. We also have an open API sandbox. It's a sandbox as a service, connecting the banks, of course, simulated data with innovators and developers from all around the world that are interested in exploring the MENA market for prototyping, for innovation, for startup incubation. And the third pillar of our company is a marketplace. So we have a global FinTech marketplace, and we understand your pain when it comes to understanding the dynamics of the region, entering into commercial agreements with banks and institutions. So this marketplace actually allows FinTechs to be listed somewhere, which is viewed by the other side, which is the institution, for collaboration and commercial agreements.
Thanks. First of all, congratulations for the launch today. Okay, it must be a busy day for you. So all the best.
I have an amazing team. They're
Awesome.
taking care of it. I only do panels and show my face.
Yeah, we want your job. Cool. With that, Houssam, can you go next and give the audience more about yourself?
Sure. Good morning, everyone, and thanks to be here, and thanks for having me. I'm a partner with the financial services team, and I look after the banking team for EY in the MENA region. And
Houssam, I'm sorry, you have to be slightly louder.
Sure. I'm a partner with the financial services team. I hope this is okay, Aditya.
Yes, it's better.
Perfect. Okay. Partner with the financial services team, and I look after the banking team for EY in MENA. And part of my consulting role is actually, which relates to today's session, is I work with a few central banks in the region to set up their countrywide fintech strategy, running a fintech accelerator, and also work with banks on their digital transformation. So basically, do have a bit of experience in terms of what type of fintechs they're looking for, and maybe a bit around how to go about the commercial arrangements and the contracting and as well. So happy to share the expertise as well, hopefully to add value today. So over to you, Aditya.
Thanks, Houssam. So with that, let's quickly jump into the first session of for today. Okay, which is really around how do we look at the emerging opportunities in the MENA region. With that, Mirna, I'm going to give you the honors to answer the first question that we've got is, can you help us understand the MENA fintech opportunity, and what do you think it makes it really attractive?
Okay. First of all, we have to understand the dynamics of the region and the fabric. The biggest mistake that any investor or fintech does is to put a blanket cover on the whole region. The region is split into three parts. You have the Gulf markets, which are very, they're moving very fast when it comes to fintech, driven by, number one, the lifestyle of living in those markets, and number two, the wealth that those markets have accumulated over the years from the oil revenues. So I'm talking here the Saudi Arabia, Qatar, United Arab Emirates, so Kuwait, those markets. The UAE is the largest market when it comes to fintech investments or fintech startups. And so that's one cluster. And of course, the drive towards fintech is because the governments are moving away from oil economy into the knowledge economy, okay, to the service economy. Other markets, and I can say the more exciting markets from a financial inclusion perspective, because the underlying element or pillar for fintech is financial inclusion and giving access to the banking sector. These are the Levant markets and some markets of North Africa. Sorry, that's my cat in the background. So you have countries like Egypt, Jordan, Lebanon. These are countries that were never wealthy. The only wealth they had was their talent. And this talent pool has been innovative and doing amazing stuff. But these countries have very, very, very high levels of financial exclusion, let's call it this way, okay? So the region as a whole, you have, I think, Houssam, you know the numbers better, but I think 60 to 70 financial exclusion. Like Egypt is barely 40% inclusion, which is an amazing economy. And then you have the other markets, which are the North African markets. These are historically connected very much with Europe and very much Francophone. So looking at the market, the most advanced markets are the Gulf markets in terms of regulations, in terms of open banking. The most exciting and lucrative markets when it comes to demand and market size are primarily Egypt, and you can bundle as well Saudi and UAE under that as well.
Got it.
That's a high level. So when you look at themes, you have financial inclusion is a very, very important theme. You have access to the banking sector and helping banks innovate. Companies like EY are busy day and night helping banks transform in their journey from a traditional bank into a futuristic bank, a digital bank. So this is another theme. And we have to be very careful as well when it comes to categorizing the fintechs, because not every fintech needs to go into a sandbox, right? So sandboxing and the notion of getting regulatory approvals is also a very interesting element, because many countries are now, I think we have maybe 6 or 7 sandboxes already in the region, regulatory sandboxes, experience and all of that.
And if I remember correctly, during one of our discussions, you also said, along with the
pockets, spend on marketing, get a license, and you're off to go. And if you're lucky, you become the next, TransferWise. So the issue here is the opportunity actually is in the B2B space because of the magnitude of the corporates, magnitude of the institutions. All of them need transformation, and that's a B2B game. But investors don't like B2B a lot. They don't understand it that much. That's why you find fintechs struggling to raise money, struggling to cope with the demand. Investors like B2C, and it's an easier proposition for them to grasp and expect multipliers in the future.
Right. Thanks a lot, Mirna, for that. I think if I have to summarize, it's basically people should look at the region into 3 buckets and then look at the opportunities into specific areas. And that's how they should map the piece. Thanks for that. That's very, very insightful. Houssam, over to you next. According to you, what are the key fintech segments that are seeing maximum traction in the region? And and in case if you can also say how they're spread across countries. So it's just the continuation of what Mirna said.
Right. So basically, if we look at the region, and I maybe throw in a few numbers just to put it for the audience, what's taking place. The estimate is probably around $237 million that have been invested since 2015 to almost end of 2019. Looking at the number of deals, it's almost close to 200 deals with an average deal size of around 1.8 million. So, and that average deal size has been significantly picking up. Of course, you have much larger deals and much smaller deals as well, but that's what we're seeing overall. If we look at some of the demographics that Mirna mentioned, while the GCC is the area that has the biggest amount of potential traction for investor money and has, of course, a sizable opportunity, but also the wider Arab world has more than 350 million people as well, and a good part of them is without financial inclusion. A very young population, less than almost probably around 50% below 25 or 27 years old, if my memory serves, and also significant mobile penetration across a number of countries. So if you look at what the some of the software indicators are out there, it signals a strong demand for digital and fintech as well. Going back to your point, Aditya, or the question is, of course, given the nature of the region, you see that the GCC is, of course, primarily the demographic composition or the population composition is more on the expat side. That's more towards the expat side. Of course, shifts between country and another, but that's a majority of that. And a good part of them come from the near shore, be it from the Indian side or from the other parts of the Arab world around the Levant or North Africa. And as such, it's not a surprise to see almost probably around very close to 45% of deals that have taken place, and the biggest demand is around payments and remittance as well. So that's one area that is growing and would potentially expect it to grow, but not necessarily at the same accelerated pace. The other areas to start looking out for is around real estate financing and trading. That's probably one of the smaller untapped areas. And the region, and for those who know the region, we love our real estate. So that presents a major opportunity. Another opportunity is around InsurTech, which is still less than 10% of the deals that have taken place, and other aspects around the wealth building. And this all ties back to, if you wish, the demographics, so to speak, because the resident demographics, they have aspirations to build wealth. And I think besides the daily mundane activities around payments, remittances, so on and so forth, there's an element of how can we help us accumulate our wealth. And knowing that banks traditionally have these very stringent criteria around their affluent, upper affluent, high net worth individuals as well. So that access to financial advice is not available or widely available. So I think the role of fintechs they can play around, especially wealth tech and personal financial management, is to disseminate that or democratize that access to wealth building and anything that comes along with that wealth building, be it trading, be it real estate capability. The other part, when we look at insurance, traditionally insurance has been one of the very limited penetration in the market. I think now there's more awareness, but also the access to the products and the adjustment of products in the insurance industry to what the demographics want and the customer lifestyle presents another opportunity. So I hope that just covers what you're looking for, Aditya, from that perspective. Happy to take more details as well.
Yeah, I didn't think I got more details than I expected. Okay, I had to make a lot of notes, and after some time I lost pace. So, but that's very insightful actually, and it pretty much seems that the way you defined it is you think of the region, think of the demographics in those regions, and based on the demographics, all those opportunities can start mapping out. Okay, so if I'm a fintech and I'm choosing one of these regions, it's very important for me to just do this homework to really understand how it really works. Houssam, just one request: the moment you move away from your laptop, your voice further breaks up. So we'll have to trouble you to ask you to be very near the mic.
I'll get closer and louder.
Sorry about that. I know these are issues of working from home, so excuse me for that.
No problem. No problem.
Cool. But with Mirna, so now I'll just get back to you. So, one of the pieces which is very unique to the region, and I think that's where the biggest opportunity will lie, is the Islamic fintech. Okay, and this is where homegrown startups can do so much better than anyone else, or people who really understand this very well. So, can you speak a bit more about the Islamic fintech opportunity and how do you see it, and both from the pros and the cons of how do people should look at it?
See, there's nothing really particular about the Islamic. Can you hear me?
Yes. Yeah.
So there's nothing really particular about the Islamic fintech opportunity other than connecting it or merging a fintech opportunity with an Islamic population or Islamic banks. So when you're talking about B2B, it's an Islamic bank collaboration. When you're talking about B2C, it's an Islamic population. And you know very well that most of the MENA markets, I mean, excluding maybe Turkey even an Islamic country, maybe I think Lebanon is the only country that is not I mean, politically, it's not labeled as an Islamic country, but most of the Arab countries are Islamic countries. And there are certain standards that are applied when it comes to entering the Islamic fintech space. In principle, any technology that doesn't deal with the banned, the liquor and the pork and stuff related to accounting standards, Islamic accounting standards, or against accounting standards, is labeled as an Islamic fintech in principle. Okay, there are certain nuances when it comes to the accounting principles and how you book the revenue and where the money, where it comes and where it's going. This identifies whether this is an Islamic fintech or not. But in principle, usually Islamic banks prefer to work with companies that abide by the Islamic laws. And what I understand from the Sharia board, and a Sharia board is obviously Islamic experts sitting on an advisory board of sorts with banks, they kind of rule out the fact that this is a company that deals with those prohibited activities. So this is the first segment. Now, there's another segment of Islamic fintech that actually deals with Islamic transactions, okay? So you have the Islamic sukuk, which is a bond let's say a sukuk is an Islamic bond, okay? So a bond, a debt instrument that follows the Islamic Sharia. Any company that deals with, the trading of sukuk, the issuance of sukuk on a blockchain, the management of, for example, murabaha, supply chain financing, transactions, any company that deals with the trading of Islamic equity, of Islamic, wealth management activities, those are true Islamic fintechs. I think Islamic fintech news, they labeled around 120 or 130 fintechs in the region. I saw a report recently, and according to the Fintech Galaxy numbers, we have 350 plus or minus fintechs in the Arab world or the MENA region. So out of those 350, you have to say maybe a third of them are Islamic fintechs, and the rest, they're mostly, I mean, as I said, by nature technology. Like we don't do Islamic transactions, but we are reporting our financials and our auditing financials according to Islamic principles. So this is the difference. But it's a huge opportunity, and especially with the Islamic banks. I mean, most of Saudi Arabia is Islamic banks, and they only work with compliant, fintechs. But then at the end of the day, would you label Oracle and SAP and Amazon and all of those as Islamic? And they're everywhere. So we have to really be very detailed about what is an Islamic fintech and what is an Islamic compliant fintech.
Got it. Okay. Oh, that's very interesting. Actually, you've broken it up into Islamic finance products. Okay. Which serve these specific requirements that will be because of the way the business is done there. And the other is more like being compliant with Islamic financial requirements, which is from an accounting perspective. Yeah. So when a fintech thinks about it, they have to think it in two different ways. One as a product opportunity and other as more of a compliance requirement.
Yeah, the basic principles of banking apply to fintechs, right? So if a bank does not allow an interest on a loan or a financing, an Islamic fintech should not allow an interest on a peer-to-peer lending. It should allow profit. You know what I mean? Yeah, so there are whatever transactions are allowed in an Islamic bank, the murabaha, the musharaka, the mudaraba, all of those, I'm not going to go into those details, but those have a certain like a journey when it comes to the transaction itself, have to be followed in an Islamic fintech.
Got it. That makes sense. That I'm sure a lot of people who are listening to it, they should keep in mind that you have to get into these finer details before you really think about how to handle that. I think it's you have to do your homework before you move forward on that one. And Houssam, on the same theme, my last question to you is two big, very interesting areas that's taking the globe anyway, but specifically for the MENA region is a subtech and the regtech. And these are definitely emerging areas in this piece. How would you sum the opportunity there?
So basically, if I look at subtech and regtech, it's one of the biggest areas, I would say, outside your typical B2B or B2C or B2B2C, depending on how you want to organize those letters. It is one of the big areas to focus on, specifically when it comes to aspects relating to the further demand from central banks on their reporting when it comes to anti-money laundering and sanctions and financial crime, so to speak, on one hand, and the increasing regulatory requirements. We see every day new sets of sanctions are being imposed on a number of countries, some of which are actually in the region, others are actually across a systemic part of the nature when it comes to the US dollar, so on and so forth. And the other part in terms of maintaining, with the typical role of a central bank, maintaining the role of financial stability as well. So there's an element of understanding and monitoring, for example, in times of stress, being able to identify the need for remittance movements, for example, how are they actually the liquidity being moved, how it's being traded, especially in the times of stress. And also all of that has to be underpinned. All of that has to be underpinned by access to data, real-time data, specifically when it comes to elements related to being able to run those real-time analytics. So what we're seeing is a number of the central banks specifically are looking at the access to real-time data from the banks, and on top of that, starting applying those analytics, what we're referring to as SupTech or RegTech as well. I think that's a very strong way forward. I think if some of these fintechs that you're having and in the audience have proven use cases with, for example, the Reserve Bank of India or other applications within the banking sector around the areas of fraud, anti-money laundering, and financial crisis, specifically applying artificial intelligence. And the plus would be being able to get access to unstructured data very, very quickly and apply that. I think that will be a good area of traction.
Oh, wow. I think that's very interesting. I think everyone who's listening to this, I think this is in a panel, if you get this kind of feedback, you've actually got gold. So this is the right opportunity right there. So guys, if any of you are working very closely with the RBI and the banks on, and I made notes with frauds, money laundering, okay, I think this is a huge opportunity, and that's where the entire region may open up for you. And if I'm not wrong, Houssam, there are almost like 200 large banks in the region.
So I would let, I think, Mirna answer that question. I don't keep a tally on that, but I think there's almost around that figure, right? If it's not a bit more, but almost around that figure.
According to the Union of Arab Banks, the last number was something close to 350, 400.
Well, oh, wow. Okay.
But then the consolidation is happening. So I think the number is going lower and should go lower. Speaking of opportunities, let's entertain the audience and give them some live opportunities right now. Actually, I know one central bank is looking for SupTech and RegTech. So if anyone has any really, amazing solution, please bring it forward. Another opportunity, these are demands, live demands, like we know somebody's looking for those. The onboarding of investors, okay, for capital markets, okay? So capital markets, stock exchanges. So there is a project that is looking at unifying the investor ID. So anybody who's been into that, who's applied anything of that sort, please get in touch. And anything on SME payments, so optimizing payments and digitizing the scoring mechanism for SMEs. So these are three, and on personal finance, anything that is on financial inclusion, but I think that's a very wide spectrum. So
wow, we should have just cut everything out and just focus on these last two conversations we've had.
What we've been talking about is just an intro. Let's get
exactly. Okay, so with that, I think this is a beautiful segue to get into. If any of you guys who are on the call, okay, think that these are interesting for you, the next question of the section is going to be very critical. Is what are some of the operational details you have to keep in mind, if you ever have to launch, your operations in the MENA region. So I think, there's one piece, I think, Mirna, I have the first question for you is, how would you prioritize which markets to enter in the region? Okay. I know you touched on it in your first segment itself. Okay. If you have some very quick thoughts, because I'm also cautious of our time. So any quick thoughts on this one?
So Anna, from my perspective, the main and the most important element is regulations. Okay, so let's put everything on the side. You can always be based in one market and expand into another market, but regulations is key. If you are into account aggregation, if you are into data sharing, why would you go and bother in a market that doesn't have open banking laws? Why would you bother to enter a market that doesn't even have a private cloud? Okay, so the first important thing that you have to do is to identify the regulations that are related to your own fintech. Okay, so for example, when you are into a market that or you are into an area where data sharing is allowed, you need to go to Bahrain. You need to go to Bahrain. You cannot go to any other market because no other market has open banking laws. Saudi, Egypt are considering that. You wait and see. You go to Bahrain and then you expand from that. So that's number one. And then you have, for example, crowdfunding. Okay, so ADGM in Abu Dhabi has crowdfunding. You go there, you start from there, and then you expand into the central bank level. And we all know that in the UAE, the IFC and ADGM are free zones, but now there's a move into consolidating everything under one umbrella, which is now being done at the central bank level. So that's my advice. First, understand, get to know your enemy before you go. So many companies fail because they are way ahead of the curve. If you're ahead of the curve, you get depleted, you run out of cash, and you start raising and raising without any movement. Okay, so be aware of where you're heading. So the first thing is understand the regulations. The second thing is, if you are into a B2B model, where regulations don't really matter, they don't matter, but you can always rely on the bank's license. Understand the banks, because the banks, and Houssam works a lot with banks. You have banks with no core banking. You have banks with no core banking. Come talk to them about share with me your APIs. You would look at you and say, sorry, what are you talking about? You're not even on my radar, okay? And start with the smaller banks. You know, sometimes the smaller banks are more agile, they're swift, they're cool, they're exciting. So don't go and work with the mammoth, and then you'll have multiple boards, and then the boards going to the boards and the boards, and by the end, after meeting 100 people, you're like, sorry, I'm going bankrupt. Okay, so be very focused and ask people who know before you enter a market. Another thing that we recommend is, when we publish innovation challenges, this is very important, and I'm not publicizing FinTech Galaxy or anything, but we are unearthing opportunities and bringing them to you so that you take advantage of them. And these opportunities are actually identified by the banks themselves. Okay, so if you go now to our hackathons and you find, you know, a company, Bank Saudi Fransi, looking for, you know, personal finance tools, if you have one, suggest it, because they are actually looking. They are out there in the market. So half the job is done. You only need to position yourself.
Got it. Brilliant. Thanks so much. That's very relevant. Quickly to Houssam. Again, it's a bit of a continuation of some of the points that you guys have already discussed. You know, if, you know, based on the type of business we have, whether it's a B2C, B2B, a B2B2C, or a B2G, right? How do you look at the opportunities? How would you advise the startups approach any of these opportunities?
So look, it's very much on the same lines of what Mirna mentioned, to be honest. It's really knowing, know yourself first and know what you can offer and relevance to the market. Typically, the same way you would go into an accelerator, you do your product market fit, right? It's not. It's going to be very. There are some markets in the region where you can almost pick up and drop off examples from the Indian market into the region, but that could be very limited to, for example, the Egyptian market, because that's probably the closest to India in terms of the size of the population. Of course, it's almost less than 1/10, but you know where I'm getting to. But the same challenges, but maybe India has them at a much bigger scale. As well. That's probably the only country in the region where you can almost lift and drop off those. For the others, I think it's very important not to come in with what will apply in India will apply in the GCC. So that mindset of customization is very important. The second is you need to have in this market what we notice, and again, there's nothing right or wrong there. right? It's before I pay you, you tell me pay me $100 and I'll give you a return of $200, right? Show me the $200 first, and then I'll pay you the $100 afterwards, right? So I think it's extremely important to come in with very solid use cases, extremely solid use cases, and proven. The market is really very much around peerage, right? So if you've done work for the Reserve Bank of India, you'll hear a lot of, for example, people open to listen to you when it comes to central banks, for example. But if you've done it for, let's say, a small-time MBFC, I think non-banking financial corporations or institutions and BFIs in India, it's going to be an uphill battle for you to come in and talk to a large bank and say, yes, I have done this. And this is not just about technical capability, it's about peerage. So to Mirna's point, I would say, depending on where you sit on the pedigree and how much capability that you have, first, go where in the areas where you have better opportunities to circumvent regulations. By circumvent, I'm saying do not violate regulations, of course, but it's more of if the regulation does not exist and you can go through the B2B route and you have the bank as the front end, that's your primary kind of approach on the matrix as well. The second is if you have a relevant use case, then you've hit the jackpot, right? The high impact, let's say, or high relevance and limited regulatory requirement. That's the quadrant that you want to be playing in. Having said that, this does not mean you don't keep an open eye on how regulations are moving, specifically as it comes to wider acceptance of eKYC, wider acceptance of some aspects of B2C businesses, but as long as they are in the low risk category.
Got it. But I think some of the points that you said, Houssam, I think there's something that should apply to every region, and it's coming back to every startup should have those common sense approach to say each market is different. The way you go to a big guy, you go with relevant use cases, you go with peerage. Okay, so in short, what you really told people is that wear your common sense, make sure you do run your homework. And in the end, doing businesses has nuances, but you still have to get your basics right.
A couple of things to add. Sorry, Aditya. A couple of things to add. I think you reminded me of them. Is that time to close deals is very lengthy. So it's a marathon, not a sprint. So you need to keep that in mind. That's extremely important as well. And if you can find a sponsor, and by sponsor it doesn't necessarily mean the traditional definition of a sponsor, like for example a platform what Mirna offers on as FinTech Galaxy, or other firms that have access to some of the relevant stakeholders, that could be a way to accelerate access to the market as well.
Fantastic.
Let me add to what Houssam just mentioned from a first-hand experience. When we went to Singapore FinTech Festival, there were hundreds of Indian companies, okay? And of course, on the plane, all banks, regulators, they were all flying to Singapore to meet the FinTechs. It's overwhelming, it's confusing. And I'm giving this example because the same happens on LinkedIn, the same happens on email. The same chief digital officer or CEO gets emails all the time and they rarely go anywhere. Why? Because you get lost among the crowd, right? Now, what I did when I went to Singapore is I went to the EY FinTech, Mumbai FinTech Hub stand. And I told them, listen, I need to bring 20 Indian companies into the MENA region, recommend to me. And Hemant back then said, okay, relax. Come tomorrow and we're going to line them up for you.
Wow.
Actually, that was the most amazing and efficient thing that I ever did between India and MENA, because they come qualified, they come vetted, they come tested, and they come ready. You know what I mean? So half my job is done. And then I do the interviews, I match with the banks. When I go and position them with the institutions or with the regulators, I tell them that these have been vetted multiple times and they have an amazing value proposition that actually works in this market or that market. So if for any FinTech who is attending this session, if you get a chance to actually go through the same funnel screening and become part of, you know, the high flyers under the Mumbai FinTech Hub and EY, you know, model, we will take you straight away and position you into the market.
Got it. I had a few more questions, but I'm also conscious of my time. So I'm going to ask my last question on this topic to Mirna. This is again as operational as you can get, is in terms of organizational setup in the region, okay, from registering a company and the whole 9 yards around compliance. You know, what are some of the feedback or advice that you would have for the startups?
Okay, so depending on the market you want to enter, you go. First of all, you don't always have to go through the regulatory sandboxing or licensing element. You can, let's say, you're a tech fin, okay? So you're a technology company in the fintech space. You don't need a PSP license. You don't need a crowdfunding license. You're just a technology company. AI, for example, okay? So if you're an AI company into any sector, you go and you enter either into one of the free zones in the UAE, or you enter into the SAGIA. So there are those companies, government entities that have a very reasonable you know, package that gets you sorted and licensed with a bank account and everything, okay? So this is the first thing you have to do. First thing is you identify the market. So where do you want to go? Okay, you identify the market, and then from there you go and register. And once you register, you start, you know, expanding as a technology firm. If you are a pure fintech, then my advice is to go into a sandbox. So if you are an eKYC, for example, or you're, I think that's the only thing in Egypt now, eKYC, they're starting another round of sandboxing for another thing. If you're payments, you go to Saudi. So there are certain sandboxing cohorts happening. They can get in touch with us or with Houssam and the team, and we will advise them where to go and how to do that. But that's the first decision, which market you want to go, number one. Number two, are you a fintech or you are a tech fin?
Cool. And Houssam, my next question to you is actually going to be how not to talk about COVID-19. Okay, so but this is, from your perspective, how do you think the fintech have got affected? Okay, so one, if you could share how some opportunities have been created, and also something that now the fintechs have to keep in mind because of any of the fallouts of COVID-19.
Okay, an interesting question, Aditya. I think it's, if I look at it, the whole digital topic was accelerated from a GCC perspective, right? I think it's not just about fintech, it's about the full digital spectrum. Quoting one of the chiefs of one of the big banks in the region, said what they used to take them months and years to approve, they were approving now in a span of a week as well. So I think there was a massive acceleration of digital, so to speak. When it comes to fintechs specifically here, I would say it's payments, of course, got accelerated. And a good anecdotal example is, for example, when we're running our Qatar FinTech Accelerator, which was supposed to launch its first cohort in a physical perspective, we had to do everything from now it's a virtual setup completely, right? So there has been adjustments. I think while the acceleration is going to take place on the digital front, some banks have the money to invest in a completely new digital architecture. Others will try to find hacks around that, and those hacks could potentially be around offering fintech or joining forces with fintechs. I think the element of being access to the market and being able to land and test and get access to data will slow things down, although conversations will continue and will accelerate as well. So I would say I'm optimistic as well, but I would take that with the pace again is something to consider at this stage.
Yeah, I think beautifully summed up. Opportunistic, but cautious about the pace. Perfect. With that, I know we are just out of time in terms of our conversations. I want to have enough time for the customer questions. So what I'm quickly going to do is I have a question from a gentleman called Prashant B. Okay. And the question is, do we have any opportunity for C to G payments? Okay. Or collections from the last mile population? So Mirna, Houssam, or any of the EY guys, do you want to take it up?
When it comes to C to G, very little is out there. I've seen opportunities in Egypt, okay, especially when it comes to taxation, when it comes to onboarding merchants. I don't know if you can, I mean, that would be probably an opportunity, but it's not, see, in Egypt, it's not happening C to G straight away. It's happening through entities like Fawri, like e-finance, so there are certain middlemen, if you want to call them, between the government and the consumer that are playing some sort of a gateway. Okay, so these are the disbursement of COVID-19 support funds. This is some sort of a G2C opportunity in countries like Jordan and Egypt. I heard about an opportunity in Saudi Arabia for anything related to real estate, digitization of the real estate financing, the payments between the ministries and the consumers, the owners of the land. So these are all last mile, opportunities in those markets, but they're not many, to be honest. The mentality of the government here is always government to institutions, institutions to consumers.
Got it. The second one I have is, I think this is a very broad question, and I think, Houssam, you would be the best person to answer this. What are some of the latest initiatives happening around neo-banking and open banking in the MENA region?
So basically, if we look at a good number of the banks are actually considering to open up a digital bank or a neobank or a challenger bank, call it whatever you want at this stage. So this is a one activity, and probably right now there are almost around 10 to 15 active digital bank setups that are taking place in the region. So I think that answers probably the first part. When it comes to open banking, the market that is advanced the most when it comes to open banking is actually Bahrain, but probably it's the smallest of the sizes as well at this stage. So if you have if you have the luxury, and I would put it in this case, the long-term view to come into the region, you can probably go to Bahrain, experiment, and provide some use cases in the Bahraini market around open banking, and then potentially pick up and use that as a regional example of where you have done that by the time the market catches up as well. But in essence, there's a significant opportunity really in account aggregation, data analytics at a wider space from an open banking by the virtue of it. But unfortunately, the regulations are still not in play except for Bahrain at this stage.
Got it. Makes sense. I have I almost have 4 questions from a gentleman called Deepak Chand Thakur. And each one of them are quite heavy questions. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and pick 1 or 2 of them, okay, and we can go deeper to that. So his questions are really around merchant acquisition, okay, for payments. And the first question is the merchant acquisition driven by the banks, or fintechs can do it themselves? Mirna, do you want to take that?
It depends on the structure of the, it depends on the strategy, and it depends on the license that you're getting. So in terms of, there are the closed loop and the open loop, and most of the time, the acquisition happens on the banking side, and the payment gateway or the whoever has a wallet kind of proposition will just plug into the banking network and start offering an app to consumers. So yeah, so far that's the majority. I don't know if, I mean, at the end of the day, remember, the fintechs here are still very young, right? So no fintech really has, if we're talking here merchants as in the SME merchants, right? So in that space, it's still owned by the bank, the relationship.
Okay, okay. The next question from him is also, which could be relevant, is have the merchants started looking beyond card-based systems? For example, wallet-based payments, QR codes payment, or RFID enabled payments?
Yeah, of course. Well, this has been going on for the past 2 years now, and in some cases it's mandated by the government. So in Egypt, for example, the QR is now a mandate. It's not something that that you have an option. And as Houssam said earlier, the COVID-19 pandemic has, you know, it really pushed and created an urgency for the digital transformation of those merchants. So you see a lot of the SMEs are going online, they're going on Instagram, they're going on, you know, Facebook, they're going on apps, and that creates a huge opportunity for wallets and for payment gateways and those. So whatever was supposed to take a 2-year transition, actually happening within 4 to 6 months.
Got it. Okay. So while we are doing this, you know, I would request the audience, in case we have not been able to answer your questions, or you have more questions, you know, for us and the panel, please feel free to write, you know, questions even send them offline. And in case if we can't answer them right now, we'll try to get back to you offline. So feel free, and you know, if in case we run out of time, we will make sure that we get back to you outside of the session. With that, I have another question from a gentleman called Prashant Vijay. Okay, the question is there an opportunity in IBOR exposure discovery? I'm honestly, I'm out of depth of this question completely. So Houssam, I'm just going to ask you if you know something.
Basically, when it comes to IBOR is coming to the market slowly but surely. And at the same time, when it comes to IBOR discovery, to be honest, I'm not sure what a fintech can do. Maybe it's more around the data, the analytics around IBOR, and trying to set the pricing, so to speak. I would say this is something to consider and talk to banks, but again, on the basis of a solid business case or a use case that you have done somewhere else. But this is an opportunity that's picking up maybe more at the larger banks at this stage.
Okay. And the same gentleman has another question, okay, and I think that's a continuation of sort of his IBOR pieces. Is the unstructured data space that was mentioned earlier, would clients in the region expect on-prem solutions, or would they, you know, be okay with a cloud-hosted solution?
So most solutions at this stage are on-prem. Most solutions, except maybe for Qatar and the UAE, where they will have data centers from Microsoft that will allow for the use of Azure as a cloud platform. Okay. That could be a possibility, but then again, it's a slightly on the midterm as well. For unstructured data opportunities, many clients talk about it, but it's more of a POC tinkering type of opportunities at this stage.
Got it. Okay. We have one.
Let me just mention something here. We are in talks with a bank in the UAE. They're transitioning their retail business totally into the digital retail business. Okay. And they're asking for an AI company that has experience in digital retail. So if anybody into data, in structuring data, analyzing data, integrating that with sales, you know, sales mechanism, lead qualification. So anything for a retail business, bring it on.
I think all of us will have to write a mail to you, Mirna, separately. But anyway, I have another question from Krishnan Soni. Do you have opportunities in mobile trading around the capital markets based on rich real-time analytics coupled with AI technology? So I think it's more around, do we have mobile trading okay, and therefore use AI and other technologies in order to power that?
There are some startups now getting into the the robo advisory level of wealth management, let's call it. But when it comes to capital markets and regional capital markets, they're way behind, and their opportunity is huge. We have now one opportunity for capital markets when it comes to, as I mentioned, the client or investor ID. But if anybody has a really good opportunity with trading, AI trading, we're more than happy to connect you with the capital markets. Depending on the market, we can probably once we analyze and understand the product and your track record, we will know which markets are ready for that, and we will help. But it's a big opportunity. When I say big opportunity, it's because it doesn't really require a lot of regulations, and the capital markets are way behind. So that creates a very interesting proposition for them.
Got it. Okay. We have another question which says that while transactions and services are going digital, are banks or governments looking to make any data sharing or similar platforms to make B2B data available with customer consent, more to enhance the visibility about customer behavior between competing players? Yeah. I'm slightly struggling to understand the complete gist of the question.
I think, Aditya, if I look at that question, maybe it's very much related to a certain extent to the concept around open banking, where you have data sharing and basically governments and service providers. So recently, Australia did their open banking approach, where they have asked for government entities, utilities, so on and so forth, to put data out there. I think maybe that's how I would interpret this question. I will go back to the same point around open banking, data sharing is still a massive opportunity. But again, it's a massive opportunity maybe from a consulting standpoint, from a fintech standpoint, from a monetization standpoint. But we have to factor in that governments will have other challenges around cybersecurity, around the misuse of this data, so on and so forth. So I would say this is probably at this stage, maybe on the slow burner. We'll see some matters popping up here and there, but I don't expect at least a massive opportunity at this stage.
Got it. Okay. Makes sense. Thanks, Houssam, for stepping in. I was slightly out of depth on this one as well. So again, we have a question from Sumit Malhotra. Okay. Have you seen AI-driven use cases on analytics in cards and retail banking in the GCC? And the next part is more interesting. Please share any opportunities in this segment.
So there are basically some. Well, this is a bit of privileged information. I cannot share more, but I know for at least one bank is actually using some of the most advanced AI fraud analytics capabilities out there. Some of the big household, between inverted commas, names out there. So I think things related. Again, I go back to the same point around the question that you asked, Aditya, around subtech or regtech. Anything that really helps the control mindset around management of risk, around payments, financial crime, and using a bit more capability than what a human being can do or traditional systems can do, I think will garner significant interest.
Got it.
Yeah, there's actually one challenge here. Let me be very honest and clear, because we had a lot of experiences with AI. AI technology that works in India does not necessarily give good results in this part of the world. Why? Because AI only works with the right set of data. Okay, and that layering of data between bank data to government data to traffic and consumption of just to have a proper behavioral analysis, that requires a lot of data to be shared, so you have a good understanding of consumer behavior, for example. In this market, very few countries have centralized data rooms. Okay, and that's why we always face this challenge of, okay, this is an amazing AI company, come bring it, and we go pitch it to the bank, and the bank loves it, but then the bank says, okay, do you have UAE data? And they're like, no. Okay, how can you help me? please keep that in mind. Whichever segment you go in, if you at some point require localized data, that could be a challenge.
Got it. Well, we've now right at 1 p.m. Okay, and first of all, let me thank Houssam and Mirna for the phenomenal session. I think you guys, this is one of the best panels I've really had, where I think the audience would have really got quite a few straight benefits from the panel. So thank you so much for your candid and honest sharing. What I'm just going to quickly tell the audience, you will get an email from EY, okay, for feedback, and feel free to also share any other questions that you may have. Thanks for being a great audience. I think the quality of questions were also phenomenal. They were very pointed, and they were very something that the overall general audience would have also benefited. So with that, I want to thank EY for setting this up. Okay, it was a great opportunity to be on the panel and moderate it. And Houssam and Mirna, again, thanks a lot for being a phenomenal panelist. Okay, I've taken a lot of notes. Okay, and maybe I'll take time to just write them all down for myself. So thanks a ton. It was very, very useful, okay, and insightful. And audience, thanks a lot for being there. And all the best. And I hope you guys take away something phenomenal from this session. Thanks
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Cheers.